خذ بعطيك وعد. وعد بدي اعطيك. خذ.
شوف يا باشا عم نقبض من الارض مثل السيفان.
إذا فيك أنا حكون واقفة بوجهك فوق.
اطلع فيكي.
تست.
It's looking
الو في بالي هونيك ايه نادي البحر بس سكول على البحر ايه يلا اهلا وسهلا مرحبين ايه يلا
USB for me. ماشيين.
تعطيك اياهم على يو اس بي؟
ايه بس
هي converter.
خليه just in case.
ماشي حخلي لك اياه هون.
في له
دي بي تحتاج معي. لا فيك تخليه هون. ما بأثر. بتعرف تستخدم.
ايه ايه فينا نعمل تيستينج بالاول بريك البريكفاست. اوكي اول بريك. We'll do some testing. That's okay. Keep it with you, just in case. And then whenever we need it, we'll.
Beirut semester because I believe we need more women.
I don't want you to worry about anything. مين في لا don't worry.
Any sign of the president yet?
No, we are maybe we can call him, right?
Because trying to start without him is not going to be a good idea because he's
Naveed is being called.
Good morning. We will start with the Lebanese national anthem, followed by the alma mater.
الزمن سيفنا والقلم
Good morning. Welcome to the 3rd annual Women in Data Science at AUB conference. Thank you all for being here today. I'm delighted to be hosting you on behalf of the Olayana School of Business and AUB. And I'm thrilled to see faces, old and new, here in person, and to welcome those watching us online from Dubai, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, all over the MENA region, and all over the globe. I would like to specially welcome the OSB Middle East Advisory Board members and our extended team at Stanford University. This conference could not have been without our highly accomplished female speakers at the forefront of data science in the region and around the world. We are very happy to have them with us today, an integral part of this effort. And I personally look forward to exciting discussions on major advances in the field. Singularity is a powerful concept. In physics, it can be defined as either a jump in an otherwise continuous process or a point with infinite value. Common examples are black holes or the Big Bang. Singularities, however, are dangerous. For instance, one can never emerge from a black hole. Arguably, we've been experiencing an intriguing singularity for a while now, not in outer space, but rather within our human spheres. The singularity I'm talking about is all around us. It is data. To be more precise, it is unprecedented data generation, storage, and analysis. We have reached a unique moment in history. What was once science fiction is now rapidly advancing science and will soon become a core business capability. Technology has set off waves of accelerating change. Innovations in data science, especially machine learning and deep learning, have expanded automation and the possibilities of this recent field well beyond what industry experts have predicted. It is now possible to create algorithms that learn from data and adapt to new inputs without being supervised, explicitly reprogrammed, or retrained. Artificial intelligence is transforming every walk of life, from criminal justice to marketing to healthcare, to banking, to economics. New trends are setting off industry disruptions and posing new challenges. Algorithms scour our social media data and browsing history and recommend to us products that we need but never knew existed. Systems enabled by data science and machine learning can analyze medical records for early disease detection, suggest new drug compounds, manage logistics, provide customer service, or even write a news story. Data scientists in this field have recently made breakthroughs that enable machines to recognize objects and faces, beat humans in solving problems, read lips, and even speak fluently by generating natural language. The volume of data continues to double every 3 years. Data scientists now have unprecedented computing power at their disposal and are devising more sophisticated algorithms. Digital giants such as Google, Amazon, Netflix, and IBM are leading the way in these innovations, seeing machine learning as fundamental to their core business and strategy. I'm happy to see these tech companies represented on our stage today. However, before we let our imagination run amok, we need to cultivate the indispensable human talent to manage the risks that will inevitably rise from data use. Perhaps to no one's surprise, AI's tools and techniques can be misused. One AI-related risk springs from the way AI models are trained. Data sets used in training algorithms are based on historical data, which, as we well know, incorporates both racial and gender biases. The results are applications of these algorithms that perpetuate or even aggravate these biases. Recently, Amazon abandoned an AI-powered algorithm recruiting tool after years of trials, as it showed systematic bias against women given its training historical data. To counteract these biases, data scientists must examine potential issues in the training data. And because of the nature of these biases, greater diversity within the field is instrumental. Behind AI, there is HI, human intelligence. And we need to make sure we have capable talent who can properly harvest the potential of automation through AI fully, accurately, and responsibly. Today's conference promotes a culture that supports the diversity critical to our success. We must ensure that women have an equal opportunity in education and economic employment. We must ensure that Aya Bdair, Zaha Hadid, Mona Nimr, Huda Zughbi, and others are no longer the exception. We must ensure that we are continually fostering a culture to promote diversity in the spirit of our history. In fact, the first coder in the history of humanity was a woman, Lady Ada Lovelace, an English mathematician. In the early 1800s, she wrote the first algorithm in history. 200 years later, 40% on average of STEM graduates in Arab countries are women, a higher percentage than in the US and Europe. However, 13 of the 15 countries with the lowest rate of female participation in the workforce are in the Arab world. Our world, hence, is at a crossroads, as terms like AI turn more colloquial, STEM fields turn more excluding of women. Can we do better? Beyond our Arab world, the Me Too movement has highlighted over the past couple of years the tribulations women endure across all walkways of life, including STEM. Therefore, our gathering here is more crucial now than ever. We feel equal parts, hopeful and fearful. Hopeful for a world that can be, fearful of the world that is. However, we must not let fear triumph over hope, for it's only in hope that we can persist. As John Meacham, the renowned American historian, recently wrote, fear is about limits, hope is about growth. We want to grow. Finally, we do not walk our paths alone. None of this would have been possible without the vision and leadership of this university. On behalf of the WIDS AUB team, I would like to thank President Fadlu Khouri, whose leadership is propelling AUB to shape the future of the region. Many thanks for the Olayan School of Business leadership, Dean Steve Harvey, who has supported us every step of the way and whose leadership inspires each one of us to transform the business thinking in the MENA region. Thank you from the heart for Ms. Rasha Bouhsali, who's working with me on institutionalizing this initiative and whose commitment and the drive are essential in making this event happen. Ms. Fida Kanaan, with whom I co-founded WIDS AUB, Dr. Lina Daou, my dear friend and colleague, and Dr. Huda Daw, WIDS AUB ambassador. I have enjoyed incomparable support from our AUB partners who have been instrumental and core to the success and continuity of WIDS AUB. Thank you for the general support of Professor Mohammed Sayegh, Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Executive VP of Medical Affairs. Dr. Wafi Sabra and Dr. Jihad Touma, directors of the Center for Advanced Mathematical Sciences, CAMS. Dr. Youssef Asfour, AUB Chief Information Officer. Professor Hassan Diab, Vice President for Regional External Programs. Ms. Salma Awaida, Associate VP for Advancement. Dr. Shadi Saleh, Associate VP for Health Affairs. Dr. Bijan Azad, Director of the Darwaza Center for Innovation, Management, and Entrepreneurship. Special thanks to Mr. Martin Aser and Mr. Simon Kashar and the entire AUB Office of Communication. And a big thank you from the heart to Kintia Shmeli and the entire OSB Office of Communication, and to Nada Khalidi Uzi and the entire OSB Facilities and Events team. They worked very hard to do an outstanding work for an outstanding event. Allow me also to take a few minutes to thank the organizations who made today possible. First, Zain Group, under the leadership of the Vice Chairman, Mr. Badr Al-Kharafi, and the Chief Diversity Officer, Ms. Mariam Saif, with whom we share the vision of women empowerment for a better Arab world. The Google MENA team, Ms. Joyce Baz and Mr. Salim Iddi, Ms. Hannah Zibyan, branch manager at Biblos Bank. I would also like to highlight the incredible support of our community partners, Girls Got IT under the leadership of Ms. Asma Zain, Beirut Digital District, and Dr. Mona Zghaib. We invite you to enjoy this conference, network, inspire, and get inspired to advance our field. Thank you. I would like to invite President Fadlu Khouri to give the AUB welcome.
Good morning. I'm going to try to be brief because I have the wrong schedule, and according to me, I was supposed to be done 30 minutes ago, or at least. Distinguished guests, partners in excellence and innovation, inspirational role models in the world of data science, it's a special pleasure to welcome you to the 3rd annual Women in Data Science Conference at AUB, organized by the Olayan School of Business. This event features outstanding women achieving outstanding results. It aims to inspire and educate data scientists worldwide while supporting and showcasing the work of women in this cutting-edge field. And I guess this is a moderately popular conference, judging by the fact that some people aren't even able to get in for standing room. So I want to congratulate Lama and Huda and the whole team. Well done, bravo. The goals of this conference really resonate with the core of AUB's mission on the right to access and use information and the necessity of women's leadership, particularly in the STEM fields. Our goal is to increase the prevalence of knowledge, accessible learning, and create a better life for all. One of the paths must be through data science, which can have a huge impact on the daily life of the already incredibly diverse, dynamic, and ever-complex organism that is the human race. And having just come back from Silicon Valley, that was abundantly demonstrated to me over the last week. Since its foundation, AUB has anticipated change and been a pioneer of new knowledge and identifying relevant gaps in expertise. At this university, we realize it's not a matter of keeping up with adopted trends, but rather of trailblazing in what uniquely best serves the needs of the people of our region and the people of the world. The AUB Medical Center recently transitioned to the state-of-the-art EPIC electronic health record system to become the first such medical center in Lebanon to adopt the newest generation of the most advanced electronic health record. This is a great model for collaboration on leading transformative research that informs both patients and healthcare providers to know more in order to do better. I know that Dr. Jumana Antoun, I believe, is speaking further about AUBMC going digital in this afternoon. On campus, AUB has been a persistent leader under Yusuf Asfour's leadership in applying technology to transform teaching, research, and student life. It's the platform for our first of its kind student election system, which implements campus-wide proportional representation and automates the voting and results, and it processes it in a secure, confidential, and reproducible manner, leading perhaps to my most controversial tweet about why the government wouldn't use a reproducible system. The university has been driving forward its high-performance computing capabilities and developing virtual computational labs. AUB has also led the Tech Care initiative to establish the Lebanese National Research and Education Network to provide technology infrastructure and services that can improve collaboration and research among universities in Lebanon and throughout the region. I believe by now we have 5 universities, 6, okay, good, more converts. Academic units are partnering with AUB's Office of Information Technology to transform the way research is taught and conducted, as well as improve student recruitment, retention, and success. And I think that's an important step towards our goal of making technology and information technology particularly a partner rather than a tool for our mission in the universities with the academic colleges. By truly integrating technology into our fabric, we will not only be able to do more, we'll be also able to open up educational opportunities to more people, a fundamental and persistent goal of AUB, to be accessible to more and more individuals who deserve an AUB education. In STEM, the achievements of our women students, faculty, alumni, and trustees are many and are growing. Among the most recent is the selection of our spectacular distinguished professor, Najat Aoun Saliba, as the 2019 laureate for Africa and the Arab states of the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science International Award. If you walk through many of the terminals in Charles de Gaulle, you'll see a picture of Najat, which makes for a pleasant change from some of the other things we see there. At the other end of the spectrum, a technology-based AUB student entrepreneurial project, All Girls Code, has taken off to decrease the existing STEM gender gap. In this, the fourth industrial revolution, as the digital age becomes embedded in every aspect of human society and every human actions, the words of one of the few two-time Nobel laureates, the great Marie Curie, stand true and relevant. She said, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." At this conference, you in the audience and connected across the region will have first-hand contact with world-class and cutting-edge knowledge creators and crafters. You will have opportunities to participate in one of the most important and growing fields of scholarship and innovation. And finally, you will connect with the inspirational role models at AUB and around the world who will share their insight on the latest technologies, successes, and challenges in a diverse spectrum of fields that data science has contributed to and can contribute to. I'm delighted that you're taking advantage of this remarkable experience and wish you every success. I'm thrilled to see the room packed, not only with women, but also with men. I hope this knowledge will bring us closer together in the service of humanity, fulfilling one of the key goals of technology, to bridge gaps and not to widen them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Khouri. I would like to welcome Dean OSB Dean Steve Harvey.
Thank you, Dr. Masui. Such a pleasure to see so many people here today. Welcome to all of our friends, our colleagues, students, our distinguished speakers, and to those who are here for the first time or those who are here for once of many times. Welcome to the Olayan School of Business. Such a pleasure to have you with us. This conference has become awesome in its growth. In its third year, it more than tripled or quadrupled its number. For you, those of you sitting in this room, you're lucky because there's a significant number equal, if not greater to you, sitting in breakout rooms listening to us right now. So why don't we say hello to the people in the other room? This is the largest of all of our events. There's no question. We'd love to see all of our events grow to this size. But if anything, this shows the interest that people have, given the diversity in this room, for this very topic. This is an important topic for us in two ways. There's the technical part, the analytics part, which is very important to us as a business school and our business analytics program, and we recognize the future as being contained within what the discussions will follow through with today and probably tomorrow as we reflect upon this conference. But probably most important, in my mind, is the connection to inclusiveness. For us at the business school, this becomes extremely important and will be a pillar of our future as a business school. If anything, we've often been heard as saying, and we really believe, that change in this world will only occur through an inclusive society. This conference is an example of that. Now, when we talk about business analytics from a business perspective or a business school perspective, we fully recognize, and this conference recognizes, that data science is a very broad topic that brings many people throughout various fields and faculties together. And we're very happy to have our colleagues from the various faculties represented with us here today, and in, of course, the program itself. In particular, we salute the ABUMC for its involvement in having a significant part of the programming this afternoon in health analytics. Without them, I would say this conference would not be half its size right now. So thank you for joining us and being there, for supporting us throughout the way. This is an incredible list of speakers. You would never think from year to year that you could possibly get better and stronger and inspiring speakers. We did it yet again this year. So thank you for joining us. It's going to be a wonderful opportunity for us to listen to you going forward. The topics are current, they're relevant, they're most certainly going to inspire, and clearly, new generations are going to be founded on some of the things that are said today. So thank you for joining us. There has been a number of people that have made a contribution to forming such an event. First, I salute our School of Business and all of the staff and many of the faculty and others and students in particular who have taken up in arms and supported us in this process. It's extremely important that we come together on these kind of conferences, and they have done so very wonderfully. So thank you for all of that work. But a particular thanks to the two, I think, brilliant leaders of this year's conference, Lama and Huda. Congratulations on a magnificent job. I found your words very inspiring, Lama, and I know that Huda's words to follow will also be equally inspiring. Thank you for those thoughts. Well, I will not muse much longer. I think that we want to get on with the event, and I will get us back on track by finishing off with a simple point of saying we're all here to learn, to connect, to interact, to be inspired, to inspire, and to share. And most importantly, to have a little bit of fun. So enjoy yourselves, have a great conference, wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you, dear Harvey. I would like to invite Dr. Huda Dao, Assistant Professor of Data Science and WITS AUB Ambassador.
Hello, everyone. It's so challenging to come after such amazing speeches. Thank you. So, as Lama said, my name is Huda Daw. I'm a Women in Data Science Ambassador, faculty member here at OSB. Let me start by saying that the essence of everything that will be discussed today is data science. To me, data science is a beautiful term. It brings together data, which is facts and measurements, and this reflects rigor and accuracy, and also science, which reflects not only passion for knowledge and discovery, but also sharing and applying this knowledge to understand and improve the world around us. Today, we are going to take you through the journey to discover how data science, how artificial intelligence is impacting our lives, sometimes even without our knowledge. It all starts with the data. Data creates knowledge, and with the right knowledge, you have the power to change people's lives. Let's start this journey with the entertainment giant that has made its way into over 148 million homes worldwide. It is recording clicks, viewership habits, and preferences, among many other data points. Its purpose is to create a personalized experience for each user, and has succeeded in leveraging the power of data science to deliver one of the best entertainment experiences available to us these days. Well, Netflix knows you more than you know yourself. And today, with Becky, we will see what skills you need to accomplish that. Another application that has become an essential part of our lives is virtual assistants. From automating simple tasks, such as sending texts, checking the weather, to paying your bills and setting up your daily routines. Constantly learning from your habits and behavior, natural language processing has made this a reality. Well, how can we converse with Alexa and Siri? What are the challenges involved? You will have your answers today. From California and Massachusetts, we moved to Dubai to discover how our region is integrating and adopting data science to drive business growth and clients' engagement. So throughout the business track, we will showcase how data science is augmenting our lives with tailored experiences and improved decision-making. But how can we take this further and apply it for a much greater impact? An impact that not only improves lives, but also saves lives. Well, our own AUB community has made a giant leap towards achieving that through digitized healthcare. With setting up the proper infrastructure and enabling access to data through EPIC. AUBMC is not only augmenting healthcare with more efficient and accessible services, but also setting up the grounds for artificial intelligence that could play a major role in saving lives. We will hear from EPIC and from our own AUBMC about their experiences. Then we will see from experts from IBM and Google AI how the move to digitization can not only transform our health, how our health is being managed, but also be a critical enabler of AI technologies that can elevate digitization into predictive medicines. Predictive medicine that offers the optimal treatment tailored per individual and hence personalized health that could save lives. So today, we will take you through the journey of data science, from data, skills, and algorithms, to applications and future thinking. We will take you through every step of the pipeline and even beyond. We are very excited to be starting off this journey of this ride with a very special speaker. A speaker that not only is an expert in the field of data science and has made her way to be chief decision scientist at Google Cloud, but also an influencer in social media and blogs. A scientist with a very rare skill. She can explain complex mathematical algorithms using fish bowls and puppies and turn what might seem to some people as dull content, some people, not me, to captivating and engaging conversations. So strap on your seatbelts and get ready for a very thrilling ride. Let's welcome Cassie on stage. We're very lucky to have you here.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with you today, and I'd like to talk to you about making data science useful. Now, you'd think data science should be useful just on its own. What is this making thing? And I'm going to tell you that I have 10 tips for you. You'll notice that they are all to do with organizational culture, people things. In my experience, data science isn't useful on its own unless we approach it the right way, unless we really take the human aspects seriously, and unless we approach leadership in data science properly. So let's go through 10 tips, starting with the first one. What on earth is data science? Let's make sure that we agree what we're talking about, because data science means different things to different people. And according to some people, it's the science of everything to do with data, and then what is data? It's all information. And then it sort of begins to sound like data science is the science of everything, and well, that just seems like we're trying to capture all the other sciences. So instead, I propose to you a breakdown of data science into 3 constituent disciplines. So data science is an umbrella term for these 3 disciplines. And here we have descriptive analytics, machine learning, and statistical inference. But how do you taxonomize those within data science? Now, some people might think it's by the tools used. I hope those of you who are practicing data scientists, you are appalled by this breakdown, because it is utterly horrible. I shouldn't even have it up here, because in each of these tools, you can do any of them. And the tools are becoming better and better, enabling more and more crossover. So, terrible breakdown. Let's try another one. To some of you, the difference between these 3 fields might have to do with methods or algorithms used in them. So you might want to break it down this way. This is also a terrible breakdown, because if you are a cunning data scientist and you have a point to prove, you can use any math for any of them. So I propose instead this breakdown. Where am I pointing? I'm aiming it in the wrong place. Ah, there we go. It's somewhere here. We can find it. We've been playing hot and cold there. So I propose this breakdown: none, many, and few. So what do you think? None, many, and few what? This one time I asked an audience this, and they said, is it data points? I said, wait, hang on a second. It's pretty hard to do analytics when you have no data points. So it's definitely not about how much data you have. Instead, it is about the decisions that you want to make in advance, what your goal is here. And this is also why I have the title of Chief Decision Scientist. To me, applied data science is all about making decisions. When we do descriptive analytics, our goal is to look at what is here in these data. We don't know in advance what decisions we want to make. We're dealing with the unknown unknowns, and we're making them known. We're having a look at what is here. When we are in statistical inference, we are making one or a few very important decisions under uncertainty. So we know in advance what we're choosing between, and we are using the data to help us make that decision carefully. And when we want to make a recipe for automated decision-making, many decisions over and over, using a model, then we will go to machine learning or artificial intelligence. And by the way, artificial intelligence, as the term is used today, it tends to refer to a subset of machine learning that uses a particular class of algorithms, deep neural networks, deep learning. So more technically, what business is getting excited about when they say artificial intelligence, the technical term for that would be deep learning. But you know, at some point you have to give up on being excessively technical, because business runs off with the language that they want to. A language evolves. So now when we talk about AI, It does tend to mean machine learning with a specific class of algorithms. And here's the good news for those who are sweating over, do I need to know the difference between machine learning and AI? In practice, when you're applying it, you don't have to know in advance whether your application requires that algorithm type, because you know what you're going to do in practice? You're going to try a whole bunch of available algorithms, and whichever one seems to be working best, that's the one that you're going to iterate on. So you start the same way regardless. And machine learning and AI is for making many decisions. So again, descriptive analytics, that's where we're getting inspired with data. Statistical inference, that's where we are deciding wisely under uncertainty. And machine learning and AI is all about automating decision making. And so because it has this decision making aspect to it, you see that it matters what our decision goals are, and therefore it matters who is setting those goals. This boils down to a human thing as well. Who is the leader here, or leadership team, committee, and what do they want to do with their data or information? And that's where it has to start. All of this stuff starts with what do the humans want to achieve with their data? Okay, tip number 2. If you're going to go into machine learning or AI, it's worth knowing which business you're in. So I have a very serious question for all of you here. Who here knows how a microwave oven works well enough to build a brand new one from scratch? Any hands? Do I see any? I see 2 hands. This is incredible. Wow, okay. I'm outclassed because I have no idea how one of these things works. Different question for you. Who here has never used a microwave oven to heat food? Okay, again, I see maybe 4 hands. Diversity is good in an audience, so we have some non-microwave users. That's a diversity conference, that's excellent. It's totally in the spirit of the thing. Now, what I want to point out here is that if we subtract these 6 people from our, what do we have? I was told 700 of you. I'm left with a very large group who, 1, uses microwaves, and 2, has no idea how they work. How interesting. Why do you trust those things? You've never read their blueprints. You don't trust them because you read how they work and you understand the physics. You trust them because you think about what you need them to do for you, and then you check whether they deliver on that. You put some food in there, you expect it to get warm, and if it comes out burnt or it comes out cold, then you throw away your microwave and you get a different one, yes? Right. That's also what you're going to do with machine learning and AI. You're going to get your microwave, you're going to put some ingredients or data in there, and then you're going to taste what comes out. You're going to make sure that it is what you wanted, and if you don't like what happened there, you go and you get a different microwave. Now, my microwave here is an analogy, and it's an analogy for the machine learning algorithms that you're going to use. Those fancy things with names like neural networks, or decision trees, or linear regression, or support vector machines, or what have you. Those fancy things. And this is a bit of a warning, because when we say machine learning or AI, we make it sound like it's just one discipline. But actually, there are several disciplines going on here. Machine learning research is the one that most courses, machine learning and AI research, is the one that most of the university courses are actually about. That is the one that teaches you how to build new and better microwaves. And you need quite a lot of education to build a better algorithm than the one that already exists, right? Think about microwaves. How are you going to build a better microwave than this one if you don't know how this one works? So, of course, you need all those years of study, if that's your goal, because there is a huge history of these things. I mean, take linear regression, which is a standard and commonly used machine learning approach today. That thing, I think, dates back to 1805, so it's more than 200 years old. These things have been around for a long time. And so if you want to create something better than what has been made over 200 years, you need to catch up on that large history. So of course you need all that study if your goal is to make new and better microwaves. But not everyone wants that. Some people just want to get cooking already. They want to solve real business problems. They want to innovate, not in microwaves, but in recipes. They want to go tinker, dabble, play in the kitchen, and figure out how to make a, I don't know what, gluten-free croissant, let's say. That is a different game from innovating in appliances. You need different skills for that, especially when it happens at scale. And what I see a lot of businesses doing these days is they decide to open a massive kitchen, right? Industrial scale, McDonald's size operation. They want to innovate in recipes. They want to serve dishes. And you know who they hire? A team full of carbon copies of the equivalent of people who have been building microwave components their whole lives. Right? To run a kitchen, to figure out how to make gluten-free croissants. What could possibly go wrong, right? And if it doesn't go wrong, don't pat yourselves on the back for excellent leadership and planning here. That's you getting lucky. You hired a bunch of microwave engineers who just so happened to be passionate about cooking, who just so happened to be great chefs. And then by accident, they went and taught themselves this other discipline of how to apply these algorithms to ingredients to make new recipes. These are completely different fields. And in fact, this isn't, it's not only two disciplines here, there's a whole bunch of different disciplines related to data science and machine learning. So one of these disciplines is data engineering, getting the ingredients. And as in my kitchen analogy, it's very easy to go grocery shopping when you're just cooking something for you in the kitchen. But when you increase the scale to, say, McDonald's scale, think about the logistics and distribution of those ingredients and preparing them at scale. Think about getting 20 tons of ice cream and delivering that all so it doesn't melt. That's the kind of trickiness that we're talking about with data engineering. Yeah, sure, when it's small, fetching data is like fetching a spreadsheet and opening it. When it's big, it's a sophisticated discipline in its own right. Then we have, as we move to the right, we have the machine learning research. That is about making new kinds of wiring diagrams, new algorithm blueprints that enable appliances that solve new kinds of tasks. Say you want to make teleportation soup. The soup must be teleported directly into the plate. Well, then you'd better hire a researcher who studies teleportation to help you make a teleporter for your massive kitchen. That's a research problem. And the researchers, those are the folks that we're training, who do that stuff. We're not really training the folks who just, use microwaves at scale. But you know what happens when they make that blueprint? Like, imagine the first microwave. It's a prototype. It works, sort of. But it's probably held together by sticky tape and hope in the lab of the researchers who made it. It is not going to be user-friendly for everyone else to pick up off the shelf and use. And probably if you slam the door too hard, the buttons fall off. So here in the bottom left is a different job, the tool makers. And Google Cloud is one of these, but there are a whole lot of folks in the open source community who do this as well. That is, take that research, those blueprints, and make nice, robust, user-friendly microwaves that don't make you want to cry when you use them, so that you can put your ingredients in and get stuff out on the other side. So that's another group of people working in this data science community. Then, on the bottom right, the recipe makers, the applied data scientists. You have a business goal of making that gluten-free croissant? How do we actually figure this out at scale? How do we make that recipe? And then, finally, we have some businesses who don't care about the innovation parts. They just want to serve those dishes, that pizza or that croissant. And so they are in the business of making sure that they have gotten together everything. They have bought ingredients, they have bought recipes or models. Now they want to make sure that they simply serve their customers what their customers need. And when I say simply, I say that tongue-in-cheek, because you want to open a regular pizza business? You're going to take existing recipes, you're going to take ingredients known to humankind, but you want to do that at scale? It's not easy. So this is what we're dealing with the business of data science. And then tip number 3. This is a bit of a warning, but it's also a happy thing. But it's a warning in terms of data science career. There is a lot of amazing strutting about how hardcore certain machine learning or AI engineering types feel about what they know, about their skills. I just want to warn you. See that thing on the right there? Who recognizes what that is? Yeah, I get a few hands. That's a punch card. There, once upon a time, people were proud of knowing how to use those things. How about today? We don't need to do that anymore. So that knowledge is no longer useful or marketable. But I bet once upon a time, there were people strutting, saying to their college roommates, hey, you don't know how to use a punch card, so you suck. There's a lot of that today. I'm sure there's people saying, you don't know how to use TensorFlow. So what kind of data scientist are you? Watch out, because the tools are getting better. Right now, a lot of what's hard is that all we have to work with are either blueprints in research papers or microwaves that have their doors falling off because the super glue is not working. But because this is super useful stuff, making recipes to automate tasks with data, because it's useful, the tool makers making these microwaves available to everyone are making better and better, more and more user-friendly tools where you just have to put the ingredients in and get something out on the other side and have a taste. So that part about how to actually use the microwave, I personally don't believe that that is going to be the most important skill in data science over the next few decades. Right now, there's a lot of strutting about it. But I just want to warn folks, don't overinvest in that too much. Maybe invest in, if you want to strut, show me how user-friendly you can make those tools that you understand. You're so proud of how you've read all those blueprints and you know all that researchy stuff? Cool. Why don't you make a package that a 5-year-old can use to put in images and get out a classification of what Lego piece is out on is shown in the photograph, right? Why not make a tool that's so easy that a 5-year-old can use it? If you're so proud, that's my challenge to you. Make an easy, user-friendly version of that. And as for everyone else, the key skills are going to be around the leadership and creativity stuff. What do we want to make with data? What problems do we want to solve? And how do we arrange a team to go about and get it done? All right, next tip. I'm a recovering statistician. And yeah, getting real personal here. As a recovering statistician who now is surrounded by a lot of machine learning folks, I'm constantly amazed at some of the naming here. For example, we statisticians, we like things to be named exactly what it does. So if we had named machine learning, you know what we would have named it? The labeling of stuff with data. But then, of course, you see that's maybe why we lost the patent on that thing, and it's now its own discipline and not part of statistics, because I guess we've always sucked a little at the marketing. Or neural networks. Let's say neural networks. Do you know how little those things have to do with the brain? They were named in the 50s. We didn't know how the brain works then. I have a graduate degree in neuroscience in addition to my statistics one. We still don't know how the brain works. And yet, look at the goal of this thing. It's named neural networks. All it is layers upon layers of mathematical transformations with a bit of nonlinearity added in there. You know what I would prefer for us to name it so it doesn't sound so intimidating? How about yoga networks? Because their special skill is that they're really flexible. They give you a nice flexible and sometimes too flexible boundary through your data. So let's name them after the flexibility. Call them yoga networks. Except there again, maybe it loses some of the marketing, some of the robot-esque stuff. There's a lot of proof by intimidation here. And I think that people who don't feel good about approaching a thing that sounds like it's fancy or sci-fi that they don't have a full grasp of, they stay out. Whereas the people who are quite happy to continue perpetuating this stuff and talk things up and speak about them as if it's something more than what it actually is, maybe they find their ways into the discipline. I don't know what diversity consequences that has. I will leave that to your imagination. But I do think that we are at a point where maybe we have let this run away with us a little bit. The language is too science fiction-y. Now, what I will say is that AI, named in the 60s, has been around for a little while, but for the longest time, you couldn't do anything useful with it. The reason it's so hot right now and the reason that it's useful today is that it requires a lot of data and a lot of computing power to make it go, and now we've got that so we can do cool stuff with it. But for most of last century, it was all talk. So how do you get funding if it's all talk? Of course you make the appeal to the science fiction. I get it. But why don't we recognize that today it is useful? And we can make an appeal to the usefulness instead of the fluff. Let's stop with this gratuitous anthropomorphization. These things are not about robots. And if you want to talk about building human-like intelligences, then why don't you use the term HLI to refer to that, human-like intelligence? So most of the AI out there today is just about labeling stuff. Hilary Mason, who is a female data scientist who's a hero of mine, today talks a lot about making data science boring. Let's make data science boring. The people who should stay are the people who like the usefulness of it. And you know how useful it is? Very. So let's focus on the usefulness rather than the fancy names, and let's stop this proof by intimidation. Now, next tip. It's a team sport. I want to point out that data is just information. And information is our constant experience as humans. Now, the thing about us humans is that unlike machines, we get bored as we start reading that spreadsheet. So if I ask you to read a spreadsheet with 1 million rows in it, first you will say no, and a second, if you do actually read it, because I tie you down and force you to, by the time you get to the 1,000,000th row, you've forgotten the first one. That's human memory. Now, great thing is first, we have writing, so we can write things down. But when you write things down with a pen and paper, it's not very easy to search and move around in that information. It's very hard to say, give me the sum of the 3rd row, the 300th row, and the 3,000th row. You have to go slowly and find that. But if you put that in a computer, and you have some easy tools, you get the answer just like that. So data, it's just information that's stored in a way that's easy to work with. But it is stored by humans, and it is used by humans. And here's the fun thing about us humans. We're surrounded by reality, but what we notice and pay attention to in reality is just a small fraction. And what we bother to record from that reality is even smaller. So when you start thinking about data as objective truth, I want to remind you that it's some human who chose to pay attention to some very small part of their experience. And then they wrote it down so they didn't have to memorize it. That second part, that's the power of data. It's a memory extension. We're all cyborgs because we don't have to remember stuff. We can look it up in Wikipedia or in the data set or wherever. But still, that stuff, it is not all of objective reality. It is fundamentally subjective. So, a diversity of perspectives matters because when we think about solving tasks with data, if we have a team that's all carbon copies of one another, they are paying attention to only one small slice of reality, and they're not that creative together if they're all the same. They're missing so much of what might be worth capturing, what might be helpful, what might make humanity better and happier. And so if you increase the broadness of perspectives that deal with this data, you pay attention to a lot more of it. You'll make fewer mistakes. You'll get better outcomes. So diversity of perspectives really matters here. And then there's another part. When we want to apply data science to solving business problems, think about the kitchen analogy. If you get 20 or 200 copies of the same microwave component builder, they're not going to do very well at running that kitchen. You need different types of workers. You need the leaders who say what we want to feed to the customers. You need the statisticians who conduct the taste test. Is it actually good enough to serve to our customers? You need the data engineers who bring us those ingredients. You need the engineers and user experience folks who make and set up the kitchen and the appliances. You also need the user experience aspects of what dishes are we serving and how does that fit into our menu? You need the ethics folks, the philosophers, who ask, is this actually an okay dish to want to be serving humanity? You need the algorithms builders to design the kind of microwave that might solve your problem. And of course you need the applied AI engineers who are going to run around and put those ingredients into the various appliances. Then you need the analysts who, you can think of analytics as, you've got all this choice of ingredients, you've got a huge dark warehouse. Which ingredients do you put into which appliances in which order? Where do you start? Well, you can just start taking in the dark a few first things off the shelf, or you can take the person with the flashlight, the analyst, who can run quickly through the warehouse and go, that over there looks promising, and that over there, and that over there, and brings that all with the data engineer back to the kitchen so that you can try tinkering and playing and iterating on your recipe. Then, of course, you need the managers who lead such a diverse team. And I have left out a whole lot of other roles. So perspectives diversity is really important here, as is skills diversity. And what we can't have is this intimidation around, you don't know the backpropagation algorithm, so stay out. You're not a real AI person. What nonsense. You take those real AI people, who, by the way, are a lot like the punch card folks, because when your tools all have that backpropagation algorithm nicely implemented so you don't have to deal with it, then like, what's that skill even for in the applied setting? If that's all you have in your kitchen, you're not going to make anything good. So let's stop this bullying, who's real here and who isn't. Data science is a science of information. We as humans all deal with information. We all have something to say, to contribute to this process. Now, maybe we need some creativity in finding our fit in this kitchen, but I assure you, everyone here today has something to contribute, has a place in data science, whether you think of yourself as a practicing data scientist or not. think of yourselves as practicing data scientists from now on. Look at you taking in this information from my speech. Okay, what's next? This is one of my favorites. So quite often when I go to leadership conferences in data science, folks will come and talk to me afterwards. And they will say things like, I was hired by company whatever to be their first data scientist. And I said, oh great, how's that going? Well, we have no data. So I never know whether to laugh or to cry when this happens. Companies, what are you thinking? Okay. What happens when that happens? What happens is a bright data scientist with some leadership skills is put into a very difficult position. Either leave this fancy job with this high title as director of or VP of or chief whatever of data science, or learn how to do a different job from the job that you were trained to do and build a team first that does a different thing. And that different thing is data engineering. Data engineering is about the delivery of the ingredients in the first place. And so if a company doesn't have any data and it doesn't have any data engineers, any means of getting data, when you hire a data scientist, that person has to say, okay, I guess I'll put my data science career on hold for 3 years, and I'll build you a data engineering team. These are two different disciplines. This happens all the time, right? It's pretty crazy. So, 2 pieces of advice. First for the offenders and then for the victims. Offenders, companies, business leaders. If you don't have data engineering, hire data engineers first. Very nice. Then for the victims, ask whether there is data before you take that job. And if you do not wish to be a data engineering leader, and the company has said there is no data, this is not the job for you. Okay, because especially in machine learning and AI, here's how I want you to think about data. It is textbooks for your student to learn from. Learning can't happen without data. And those textbooks, by the way, textbooks are made by human authors. We had a note about bias in this morning's address. The human decides which examples are in the textbook, yes? And if that human has some skewed perspectives about the world, they will put some skewed examples in the textbooks. And here's the thing about math, algorithms. They don't have this diversity of experience that you might have by going out and doing something other than your job, by just living in the world and getting all kinds of different information as a human. Those algorithms, you know what they will learn? Only what you show them. So you feed them some stupid textbooks, what comes out? Some stupid results, some stupid recipes, some stupid decisions, and some stupid impressions. Garbage in, garbage out. So not only do you need data to get anything done in data science, you need good data and relevant data. I tell Google engineers, if they're going anywhere near machine learning or data science, I want them to tattoo the following sentence on themselves. So far, no tattoos have happened, but it's my recommendation. Like, write it on your forehead in mirror script every morning before going to work. And here's the sentence. The world represented by your data is the only world you're going to succeed in. So, if you have no data, you know what world you're going to succeed in? No world. And if your data doesn't represent reality, your models are going to be correct in a cartoon world, not this one. So, what are we doing here if our textbooks suck? Nothing. Start with data engineering. And if you are a data scientist or data science leader in a company with data engineering, a little cultural thing, Data science is the client to data engineering. They are the customer. If these two organizations don't talk to one another, and the data engineers have some strange ideas in isolation about what they'd like to do with data, like curate it if they're librarians essentially, and they tell the data scientists to back off, there's some serious organizational problems here. There needs to be more direct collaboration. And of course, data science has to give direct feedback to data engineering. We are the customers, here's what we want. Give us what we want as customers. That makes sense, but I see that not happening quite often. Okay, next thing. Inspiration is cheap, but rigor is expensive. What I see a lot is companies hiring a bunch of PhD folks. And these PhD folks beating their chests and telling everyone, stay away from the data. You are not qualified to touch it. You don't have a PhD and thus and so. Okay. Here's the thing. You know what all of us humans do? We process information, we look at it. That is data analytics. We can look at a scene and describe this is what is here. Everyone is qualified to do that. And depending on how good the tools are, maybe it is easy to open the information, maybe it isn't. But once you get it open, everyone is qualified to have a look and report what is here, to get inspired. So everyone in the company should be allowed to participate in this, encouraged to participate in this. We don't even know what questions we want to ask until someone has a look at what we've got right here. So enough of this, you need a PhD or you need special knowledge about math or algorithms to get into data. Everyone is an analyst. The best analysts are the ones who are fast at doing this on large data sets. But you know what? I'd rather have 100 beginner analysts than one totally awesome one. They'll probably cover more of my data than one hero can. So let's invite everyone to participate. But here's the thing. When we want to leap beyond what we know and what we can see and deal with uncertainty, that is an Icarus-like leap. Why do we expect that to be easy? Why do we expect that just because we put a whole bunch of effort in and we use all those methods from Stat 101, that reality owes us something? That it owes us a perfect result, or a working model, or a great decision outcome. Reality doesn't owe us anything. We're jumping from what's known, what is here, that's what analytics deals with, to what is unknown. That's hard. That should be hard. And that is the part that we need expertise for. But that's not always what you need or want in a company. Sometimes you just want to see what's here. So let's stop being confused about what the qualifications are to get into this stuff. If you want to deal with what's beyond your data, sure, expertise is important, and quite often things won't work out there. That's what it means to deal with uncertainty. When you want to stick to what's here, everyone should be participating. We're all doing it every day just by using our senses. Now, here's something that you learn in a statistics class. And then you promptly forget it when you go into data science. It would be better if you didn't. It's this. A data point can be used for inspiration or rigor, but not both. So you must choose inspiration or rigor. And my example with this is a slice of toast. You might look at a slice of toast, and you might notice that it vaguely looks like the Mona Lisa. That's cool. That's your human perception finding patterns. You're really good at that. And the thing is, this particular piece of toast, it might look Mona Lisa-ish. And a valid statement would be, this piece of toast right here looks Mona Lisa-ish. Valid. And that's descriptive analytics. That's sticking to what's in the data. Now here comes your mistake. You are inspired by this Mona Lisa to wonder whether bread always looks like Mona Lisa. Good, you're inspired. So far, so good. And then some wires get crossed because you leave common sense and you go to mathematics. And you think, if I just do a little statistical test on this same piece of toast, I can get my answer about whether all toasts look like Mona Lisa. And you know what your algorithm's going to say? Strong Mona Lisa pattern. Yes, all toasts look like Mona Lisa. Okay, big problem. Do you know what you need in order to check whether toasts beyond this one look like Mona Lisa? New toast that you haven't seen before, that hasn't inspired you with this pattern. Because if you've already seen that the pattern is there, all the statistical methods are asking is the pattern strong? In fact, the statement of what statistical hypothesis testing says is this pattern surprising? Folks, if you've already seen the pattern, it's not surprising. It would only be surprising if you haven't seen it yet. So you need fresh data in order to check whether your impression holds water. You cannot use the same piece of toast. So your option is either to come up with your question beforehand, then look at that piece of toast, and you hope you ask the right question, or forget the rigor, just have a look, describe what's in this piece of toast, that's it. But there is a way that you can have both. It's an amazing thing. It is the best invention since sliced bread, I think. And that is splitting your data. In fact, I want to propose to you that the entire history of data science is a history of data splitting. So here we go. Humanity begins with no data sets. Yay. How do you form an impression if you have no data sets? Nowhere. It comes from nowhere. How do you check if your opinion is any good? You don't. Yay, all kinds of subjective nonsense opinions. Then we discover writing, that's cool. And then we go one further and we write things down in an orderly manner. And there we have a data set. Nice, one data set. Now, because we have one data set and we only have enough data for one data set, we cannot split this into two separate data sets, we must choose. Either we use it for inspiration, we have a look at what's in these data, but that's like finding Mona Lisa in a piece of toast. We can't take our opinions seriously, but there we go, we've got an opinion. Or don't look at the data yet. Carefully think first, meditate in a closet. Think about what question you would like to ask these data, and then one time and one time only, open that data set and get a rigorous answer as to whether your opinion holds water. And that is statistical inference. One or the other, that was your choice when you had one data set. And I want to point something out. If you only have one data set, you must choose. You cannot have both. And then, in the times that we only have enough data for one, there are certain industries that today will still tend to have data sets that aren't large enough to turn into two, for example, medical research. In those industries, you must choose, and then you get this splitting of culture. This is interesting. You get the analysts who give up on rigor, but they still want to feel good about what they do, so they might pretend that they do something that's a little more rigorous than what they're actually doing. I frown on this, because what's going on there is just having a look at what's here and finding as many patterns as possible. Are they any good? Who knows? We're using that same part of our brain that finds the Mona Lisa in a piece of toast. Please, folks, be humble. Don't take yourselves too seriously, but have a look at what is here. Just don't overreach beyond the data. And then we have, but this is now a culture of enjoying yourself, opening a data set, being as sloppy with it as you like, getting as inspired as possible. Then we get a different culture that is the statisticians, and this is where I grew up. the camp I grew up in, these are the folks who are always shouting at you to be careful. Do not look at the data. Use it one time only. And if you're going to use it multiple times, then do multiple comparisons, correction, and all kinds of stuff like that. Meditate in a closet first, open it one time, and they're super careful. And they tend to say amazing things, amazingly nasty things to analysts. In fact, I was on an email chain recently. I was appalled to see this. I was asking about an analytics tool. And there were statisticians on this email thread. And one of the statisticians wrote, "I hope a tool like this doesn't exist, because it would invite misuse." This sounds like statisticians, right? A tool that allows you to look at your data a whole lot, that's no good, because that's the opposite of meditating in a closet, coming up with your one question, and then getting that careful question answered right. But here's the thing. How do you know it's the right question? It's pretty hard to get inspired in a closet and ask the right question. All of this is, for many industries today, such horrible, old-fashioned nonsense. Because today, we can get enough data for 2 data sets. And you know what we do then? We just simply split the data into 2 data sets. You got 2 pieces of toast. Instead of looking at both of them, look at one of them, do analytics on it to get inspired about the questions you want to ask, and then answer them with the other piece of toast. Job done. You can have both. Both the analytics, the inspiration, and the statistics, the rigor. And you don't need to have this cultural fight between the two. And yet still, you have people trained as analysts and you have people trained as statisticians and you hire them and they don't get along. There is a solution. It's called the 21st century. Just split your data. But in order to satisfy these requirements, you need to be in the habit of splitting your data, which is why this is my favorite idea. Always split your data at the beginning. And here's the other thing. We have too much of this look at the data, slice it from every angle you like first, and then just show the rigorous version that proves your point on the same data set where you do a fishing expedition. Why would anyone today trust someone who takes that approach? And then, you know what they do? They argue the math and the methods as a basis for what they're talking about. You know what? I tend to ignore that all as noise. Sorry to those of you who do your science like that. And I say, fine, if you've got some opinion, why don't we see how it works on data that you haven't looked at yet? Because if you know what you're talking about, then you should be able to predict what these data that you haven't been able to tamper with will do. That's the best basis for trust in business as well. Not what algorithm sliced what in what way, but here's some stuff that we didn't know anything about. We have some theory, wherever it came from. Does it actually work there? So this splitting actually applies to a whole lot more than just data science. And it is a privilege of having a lot of data. But wait, there's still one more aspect. Where does the inspiration come from? In statistics, that rigorous approach, it requires you to use your data set only one time, or if you're going to use it multiple times, you need to pre-plan every test. So when you decide to go to testing, that statistical part, that data set gets used up. So before any sensible leader approves of that testing procedure that burns through their precious testing data set that lets them know if their opinion is nonsense or not, they're going to want to know the credentials of the human, the analyst, who came up with the inspiration. You're going to prefer the experienced analyst who knows a little bit about your context to the intern that's just wandered onto the scene. Yes, you've got the privilege of checking whether or not the thing works, but it still kind of matters who got you the inspiration. And so you're going to trust a seasoned human, and you know what you're not going to trust? Just some algorithm that does some stuff to some data. Unless you have 3 data sets. If you have 3 data sets, if you can split your inspirational one into 2 pieces, you get a little interim test drive where you don't end up burning your final data set on some piece of inspiration, where you get to check in the middle, is this actually worth using my precious data for? So now everyone can have a go. The intern, the seasoned analyst, the tea leaves, the stars, everyone can help form the initial model. Then we check if any of them seem to be working on a middle data set, and then we go finally to testing. That is the essence of what machine learning is. A whole lot of automated inspiration in the beginning, haphazardly, where you can bounce it back in the middle. You don't have to blow your final data set on it, where you can try things out and iterate a whole lot, multiple tries at coming up with a solution. So if you want to know what machine learning actually is, because it is the same math and the same algorithms, machine learning boils down to the privilege of having 3 data sets. You have data to burn. 2 initial data sets before you have to check whether your final model works on new ingredients. But today, we go one step further. We use 4 data sets. We, in exploration, have a refinement step as well. Because what that validation or middle data set lets us do is it lets us have a performance check, but we don't get to do any debugging inside. We just get to see how well we're doing. And that's how we avoid training too much on the validation data, but we still want to have some direction of what to do next when things don't work. And so we use a 4th data set to go and debug inside and look at individual failures and figure out what to do next. And this might be a little technical for those of you who aren't practicing data scientists, but because I like data splitting so much, my one technical piece of advice for you is 4 data sets, not 3, not 2, not 1, if you can afford it. This is the privilege of having a lot of data. Also, a note here is, if you don't have much data, can you do AI? Nope. And what is transfer learning, by the way? Transfer learning, people make it sound like it's doing AI with no data or with very little data. That is not what it is. Transfer learning is where you get to use the results of someone else's data as a starting point for your own project, so you need very little of your own. That is a different thing. Still needs a lot of data, it's just that you're borrowing someone else's. So AI only works when you have a lot of data. Then, last things, and I'm going to be quick so I can give back the floor. This business of leaders saying to me, and I hear this all the time from senior leadership, data science is useless. Well, here's why it's useless. You hire a bunch of microwave builders, you put them all in a room together, and you tell them to go be useful. When you hire these folks and you get them out of academia and they have PhDs, they're going to do, most likely, what is in their comfort zone. Now, I want to remind you, and I might be making fun of a few folks here who are in academia, so I apologize, I was there as well. But let's remind ourselves what the reward is. You know, creatures respond to incentives and rewards, yes, and they might stick around in an environment that gets them a lot of rewards. Now let's think about what academia is in that sense. In academia, you get a reward, a pat on the head, a gold star, every time you do the most complicated thing you know how to do. Am I wrong? The most sophisticated thing in your arsenal. Not necessarily the most useful thing, but rather the most impressively complicated thing. And so then in industry, when you leave academia and you're put in a room with a whole bunch of other academic type folks, and you're not asked to do research, you're asked to do useful data science, you're not going to want to take the solution that adds the number 1 plus number 2 and, makes $100 million, because how are you going to write a paper about that? So there is a tendency for academically trained data scientists to do things that are complicated. That's their comfort zone, rather than focus on impact and usefulness. The problem is the leadership. You can't expect folks to just naturally transcend and do something else. Instead, here is my piece of advice for leaders. Rigor must start with you. Shut down the ability of data scientists to do complicated things on their own. No longer allowed. Instead, ask everyone to engage in analytics, looking at data, and bring those results to the business leader. And if the business leader sees something in those inspirational results that triggers a reaction, this is important for the business. This is worth pursuing rigorously. This is worth doing something complicated with. Then they make that request explicitly to the data science team. So they decide what to pursue rigorously, rather than just allowing this process of it's interesting to do something complicated for no good reason. So that is a split then, also an intentional split between inspiration and rigor. Inspiration all the time, and if the decision maker sees something in that inspiration, go rigorous on it. That directs that beautiful, potent skill of the academically trained data scientist in the direction that is good for business. And then finally, I'm going to zoom through one last thing. A quick tour of the different kinds of data professionals and how you should think about what they are in terms of the data split. So up above the toy data, that's simulated data or data sets that are used as benchmark data sets, that's in gray. All the data is in orange. That bluish one on the right is the inspiration piece for everyone, and the greenish part is the rigorous piece. Now I want to show you in which data which role works, just so that you can get a sense of how this goes down. So first we have the inventor. That's the researcher. Research data scientist, research statistician, AI person. They tend to work in benchmark data sets. They're not solving real problems. They're working with toy data where the results are understood, where we know how that data performs, and we're seeing if we can make a microwave that performs better. It's like everyone has the same egg. Let's see whose microwave works best on this egg. Then the toolmaker also tends to work on toy data. So if you're going to make that cool microwave that everyone can use, you tend to also be working with benchmark data. Then we have the raw material supplier, that is the data engineer. That brings all the ingredients and usually is responsible for the splitting as well. The search engine, that is the basic analyst. That's where all the leader wants from them is something like, tell us the revenue numbers for last quarter. Produces facts from the data, looks things up. That is a type of analyst, but there's another type of analyst. The type that finds something worth pursuing, finds inspiration for the decision maker. And this person's job is a lot like a prospector for minerals or oil. Do we know that we are for sure going to find some gold in this area? No. So can we be held responsible in advance for what we're going to find in this area? Also no. The right way to manage these folks is to say, here is your area that you get to work in, those data sets. Here is the amount of time I'm giving you. Now go do your best. If you don't have a no-strings-attached culture of analytics, you're not going to do well at finding the right rabbit holes for your experts to go down later. You cannot hold your analysts accountable in advance for what they're going to find. You need to have the guts to say, I'm investing time in analytics. You get 2 weeks on those data sets, go. Maybe they come back with something, maybe they don't. Very few companies have the guts to do that. And as a result, very few cultures can take advantage of analytics. That's a quick fix as well that you can think about as leaders. Then the decision supporter, the statistics team. The leader has figured out that some inspiration is worth pursuing. You go and you do the statistical analysis on the final data set. A mistake that you might make here is to usurp the decision role. You are carrying out what the decision maker, who works in between those two, has told you to do. Don't usurp that role unless it was delegated to you. It is the decision maker who frames your analysis for you. Then the decision maker is the one who looks at all this inspiration and decides what is worth pursuing rigorously. This person has to have business skills, has to understand your business environment. And then the automator, that's the machine learning person. If the decision maker wants to use data for repeated decisions or automation, then you're going to go back and you're going to poke around in that inspirational data and make it work. That's your goal. Turn it into a model or recipe that does the job. Then there's the information artist who visualizes data, who thinks about communicating things in a way that the human mind can take those facts in. That's non-trivial. And then there is the rare unicorn that is the all-in-one. These exist, but they are very, very rare. But there is a myth that it's every data scientist. Having seen these different roles, I hope you recognize just how different all the skills are. It would be ridiculous to expect your data scientist to be all of these. The coding styles between a data engineer, a machine learning engineer, and an analyst are completely different coding styles. You want one person to code with 3 different personalities? That's already split personalities. Now you want an analyst to also be a statistician. One goes very slow, one goes very fast. Whoa, that's too big of an ask. And yet, there's so much messaging in the industry that makes it sound like this is what data scientists have to be. You're not a real data scientist unless you're all of them. And then all these poor data scientists, they have this virulent imposter syndrome as a result. I just want to tell you all, it's okay, calm down. No reasonable grown-up can expect you to be all these things. Pick one and be good at that one. Whichever one of these you pick, you are a super valuable member of the community. And focus on that one thing. Know what you're good at. And have fun with data science. Thanks, that's everything from me.
Thank you, Cassie, for the amazing keynote. We're going to cancel the Q&A. If you have any questions, you can talk to Cassie in person during the break, and we'll go on a 10-minute break.
حطيتها 10:40 to 10:50.
They will not be back for 15.
Can you tell them?
ما بيأثر بعد الظهر عندنا نقص بدنا نعبيها ما مشكلة.
Put
40 to 45 to sorry
50.
55. لا 55 ما حيجوا. Okay, so we continue. Please have your seats. Yeah, so just waiting for the live streaming team to be ready. شو رجب شو Is the team ready for live streaming? Is it ready for us? Yeah, ready? Okay. So we're going to start track 1, Data Science in Business, Applications of Data Science in Business. And this track is moderated by Layla Khawli. Layla is a full-time lecturer of marketing at the Olayan School of Business at the American University of Beirut since the year 2000. She has taught courses at the undergrad, grad, and executive levels in the fields of marketing and economics. She has introduced and coordinated several highly specialized courses at the school and was nominated 3 times for the Teaching Excellence Award at AUB. Her research interest lies in how brands are adopting digital strategies in the region and the creative industries in Lebanon. Layla is also a communication consultant and has worked with leading local and regional brands. She focuses on developing and implementing brand communication strategies, both offline and online. Layla assists organizations in creating and managing their digital presence, and she has conducted several workshops on digital branding in Lebanon and the MENA region. Please welcome Layla Khawli.
Thank you, Lama, for this long bio. Okay, so I really feel thrilled and honored today to be presenting amazing speakers from disruptive organizations. I think we've spoken a lot about the companies we have here today. We have, of course, on the panel this morning, as you can see on your agenda, we have Netflix, and we have Amazon Alexa, and we have NBC, and we have, of course, Heart and Science from Dubai. We'll be looking at data science and business, from all the global perspective going down to the regional perspective. So just before we get into the module, I just want to remind you that each speaker will get 20 minutes to speak, and we'll leave the Q&A for the last 20 minutes. If you have any questions, you can tweet them, post them on Instagram. I want to remind you to follow our hashtags, the WITS 2019, the WITS AUB at WITS AUB 19, and WITS _ AUB for Twitter, and WITS at AUB for Instagram. Did you get all of this, everybody? Yes? Did you all memorize it? I think it's on a slide, yeah. The only thing to add, if you want to tag us, it's at WITS _ AUB for Twitter and WITS at AUB for Instagram. Okay, and you can ask your questions, we'll document them, and we'll have them at the end. Okay, so, and there's also, by the way, the roundtable talks that are happening in parallel for those of you who want to attend. It's all in the agenda. Right, so today, so our first speaker for this morning is, for this session is Becky Tucker. So Becky is a senior data scientist at Netflix, where she works for the Studio Science Analytics team in the Los Angeles office. Previously, she worked for the content demand modeling team, where she built predictive models for use in the acquisition and creation of films and TV shows. Prior to working at Netflix, Becky completed her PhD in physics at the California Institute of Technology. There she studied the cosmic microwave background and the earliest moments of the universe. Her undergraduate degree, also in physics, was from the Georgia Institute of Technology. The topic that Becky will be talking about is where have I seen this before? Building data science intuition. Of course, I'm not going to read the synopsis, she'll be talking about it. But just a quick story. Of course, when I asked my students about Netflix, they all say, who watches Netflix? Everybody watches Netflix, of course. And the comments was that it not only renders us unproductive the entire weekend, but it can also create award-winning original content, too, after its Oscar win for Best Director, Cinematography, and Best Language for the international hit Roma. As I was looking, Fast Company this week has a series of articles, and I liked how they are titled, "This is how Netflix changes everything." And I thought it's so appropriate. And it says, quote, our new series considers how the once modest streaming app became the most important company in consumers' lives today and is altering everything. So how do you do it? So that's what Fast Company is covering this week, which I thought was interesting. Okay, so I leave you the floor, Becky.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me, and I am honored to be here today talking with you all about building your intuition in data science and why I think that is important. This is something that I do as part of my job at Netflix and as a data scientist. So to begin with, I'd like to give you a little overview of what you can expect from this talk. I'm going to start by talking about why I think intuition is important, especially in data science, a little bit about who I wrote this talk for, the challenges of data science and why I think that intuition plays into that. And then I'm going to use a case study of neural networks to explain exactly how I go about trying to learn new material. So to begin with, why is intuition important for data science? Well, if you apply an extrapolation in an area where it's inappropriate, you may end up like this poor woman trying to negotiate bulk deals on wedding cake. Intuition is really important for what I do because data is imperfect. Data is not the world and the world is not data. Data is an abstraction, it's a representation of the world, and it's typically a faulty and incomplete one. The same thing happens with a lot of techniques. They're doing something, and they may or may not be doing the thing that you hope or expect them to. And if you don't start putting together that intuition of what is this technique really trying to do, where could it be going wrong, you may end up in a really silly situation or even worse. I find this is especially important in technical areas, which brings me to my next point, which is who is this talk for? I wrote this talk for myself about 5 years ago, and also for myself, sometimes today. Data science is a really huge field. It's moving really quickly, it's becoming increasingly competitive, and even though my background is in physics, a lot of the newest, latest, and greatest research is coming out of CS, and there are times when I feel like, oh man, do I need to go get another PhD to even catch up with everybody else? How am I supposed to compete? And then I remember that actually the technical skills are really only one part of my job. In fact, I would say there are at least 3 other things that are equally as important for what I do day to day. First of all, domain knowledge. Your data is not just data. It represents something you need to understand. The world is not a Kaggle competition. I could give an entire talk about just that subject, but I won't. The other thing I think is vitally important to what I do is the analytical skills. This is the ability to take a problem, break it down into pieces, step through it, and come up with a solution at the end. I find that there are lots of fields that build these skills. So there's obviously a lot of successful data scientists from science and engineering, but I work day to day with successful people from psychology, from economics, from one person was a music major. There are so many fields that help you develop these analytical skills. Communication and empathy. So This is, I think, one of the most vastly underappreciated skills as a data scientist. This includes the ability to really listen to your stakeholders, understand their problems, collaborate with your team, provide results in a clear and understandable way. If I build the very best model in the world and no one uses it because they don't trust it or understand it, or they don't feel listened to, or they feel like I'm telling them how to do their job, the effort was for nothing. I could give it another entire talk about communication and empathy, but I won't. And then lastly, your technical skills. I talk to a lot of young people trying to get into data science, and this is the thing that they always want to focus on. What do I need to know? What programming skills? What mathematics? What statistics? This is also the area where the field moves the fastest. Things that were relevant 5 years ago are no longer relevant today. When I first started in data science, it was really important to know how to write your own MapReduce jobs. Nobody writes a MapReduce job anymore. And part of the problem with this is that data science has become this umbrella term. I've started to think of it as a term like law or medicine. Someone says you're a data scientist, and the next question should be what kind? Because depending on your industry, your level of expertise, what maturity the company you're at what is the level of maturity of the company you're at, data science could encompass one or all of these things. You may, in fact, be in the situation where you're the data scientist they hired who also gets to be a data engineer, in which case you might want to know a little something about data modeling. You might be doing data visualization. You might be doing statistical inference. You might be doing machine learning. And so then the question becomes, how do I know what to learn, and how do I learn it? Because the only thing I can guarantee you about being a data scientist is that you are going to be required to learn new things. One of the greatest joys of my job, actually, is that I consider the fact that over the past 5 years, my own personal skill set in terms of both machine learning and other tools has expanded enormously. Learning is a pleasure, but there's a question of how do I actually go about doing that? And so this is my advice. First of all, be fearless. Some of you may not need what I'm about to say, but for those of you that do, I'm here to tell you that there is no secret club of mathematics, and there's no secret password required to get into it. Everyone is capable of learning these things, even if you don't necessarily come from a traditional science and engineering background. Secondarily, I would encourage you all to, whenever you're encountering something new, break it down into small pieces. Find something you do know, start there, and then work your way back up to the bigger picture, connecting it back to things you already know. So I decided to give you a case study for this. And so let's say that we would like to classify images with neural networks. This is one of the most canonical examples of what people use neural networks for. So today, we'd like to know whether or not we're looking at mops, muffins, or dogs. And so, maybe you've used a neural network before, or maybe you haven't, and so you start Googling. Well, this is probably what you're going to find when you start Googling neural networks. If you've never seen one before, your reaction, like mine, may be something like this. That's very pretty. What is it? Well, so here's my advice. You don't have to take in the whole thing at once. Take one piece of it. Today we're going to focus on this piece called the Softmax Function. So we Google the Softmax Function. What is it? Well, it's the generalization of the logistic function. Depending on your background, that may or may not be a helpful thing for you to know. You might say, well, where have I seen this before? I'm a physicist, so I said, oh, this is the Boltzmann distribution. This describes particles. An economist might say, oh, this is discrete choice models. But maybe you're not a physicist or an economist, in which case you keep Googling. So you say, well, what is this logistic function? This sounds like something that might have to do with logistic regression, and that's a technique I do know. Well, that makes sense because we use logistic regression for classification, and that's what this neural network is trying to do. This seems like a really promising avenue to explore. So we Google the logistic function, and I feel like now we're getting somewhere. This is a function. It has one variable. We can plot it and look at it. And so let's say we do that. What do I see when I look at this plot? I want you to notice two things about it. First, notice that as you move to greater and greater values of x, it asymptotes at 1. And as you move to negative values of x, it asymptotes at 0. In the back of your head, that should be pinging your memory that things that are bounded by 0 and 1 probably have something to do with probabilities, right? So just keep in the back of your head, okay, I don't necessarily know what this function does, but I'm sure it has to do with probabilities. The other thing you might notice about this function is that it's completely smooth, which means you can take a derivative of it. Again, if you've taken a calculus class, you might have spent a lot of time minimizing functions. What do you have to do to minimize a function? You take its derivative. And since most machine learning algorithms function off of some sort of minimization algorithm, you might think, okay, so this probably is something I can minimize, or it can be used to minimize in some way. But even if you don't have that mathematical background, you can start forming connections in other ways. You can form them from history, from other things. You might say, why does this equation exist at all? Or what does it have to do with logistics? These are also valid questions to start connecting this back to what you already know. Well, if you look it up, this equation was developed by a Belgian mathematician in 1844, Pierre-François Verhulst, and he was using it to study population growth. He liked it because it has a really rapid rise at the beginning, an area of approximately linear growth, and then it evens out at the end. That on the right is his original graph of the logistic function. So we'll take a closer look at this, and you can see this is a clearer picture of the fact that it does, in fact, rise quickly, become approximately linear, and then smooth out. You can see why, if you're studying population growth, that this is a function that might be really helpful to you. And so what does it have to do with logistics? As it turns out, absolutely nothing. He was actually trying to choose a word that contrasts with the logarithmic function, which you can see he's plotted on the same graph. The word for logistics, the complex movement of people and organization, actually comes from a French word for lodgings, primarily due to the lodgings for army troops. The more you know. So back to logistic regression. So what the goal of logistic regression says, well, given some knowledge about our images, what is the probability that my new image is of a muffin? So knowledge about our images could mean a lot of things, but for our case, we're actually just going to count the number of dark spots. We're going to say things that have 3-ish dark spots are more likely to be dogs, chihuahuas. Things that have more than 3 dark spots, more likely to be muffins. And so we want to know something like the following. Given some line or function that describes the number of spots we have, how probable is it that my image is of a muffin? Well, there's a problem with what I just wrote. It doesn't work, because the probability that something is a muffin is a thing that is bounded by 0 and 1, whereas that line that I have that has to do with the number of spots can take on any value. So we need a way to squash our line between the range 0 and 1. But wait a second. We just talked about how this function does exactly that. It takes any x and squashes it to a value between 0 and 1. So the logistic function is a squasher. It squashes your values. And so what you actually have in logistic regression is something like the following. The probability that my image is of a muffin is actually the logistic function of some function describing the number of spots I have. The logistic function makes sure that my output is a probability. And that's important because then you can have things like saying the probability that my image is of a muffin is 85%, 0.85, and the probability that it's a dog is 0.15. But remember that our original problem was actually to choose between 3 categories. We had dogs, mops, and muffins. And so if our logistic function acts as a squashing function between 2 categories, we must need something more general if we're deciding between more than 2 categories. Well, remember that one of our original definitions for this softmax function was that it's the generalization of the logistic function, or as I prefer to think of it, it's the multi-number squasher. So when you go back to this diagram, you can look at it and say, this function at the end, it's taking inputs of any value and creating probabilities between 0 and 1. And that's going to be true no matter what neural network diagram you stare at or which softmax function whenever you encounter the softmax function in other places. With that, out of this neural network, you will probably get something like the probability that I have a muffin is a number between 0 and 1, 0.84, and some very minute possibility that this is actually a photo of a mop. And so now we know at least one piece of this diagram. And the thing is that we can do this with every piece of this diagram. We could take a deep dive into the cross entropy. We could take another look at this bias function or these weights. It actually, every single component of this diagram can be broken down by using the same method. So whether it's mops and muffins or Markov chains and mixed effects models, Every single part of this is attainable and learnable. As long as you're fearless, you break it down, and you connect it back to what you already know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky. Simplified things for us again. Okay, so next we have Mariam Fazil Zarandi. So Mariam is currently a machine learning specialist at Amazon, working on conversation AI for Alexa. Before joining Amazon, she was a senior research scientist at Nuance Communications. Mariam received her PhD in computer science from the University of Toronto in 2013. Her research interests are in the areas of knowledge representation and reasoning and machine learning with a focus on natural language understanding and dialogue management. And again, I had to have a take on my students about Alexa, whether they're using it or, and you know, we're all talking about how amazing it is that voice-over assistants have, you know, enhanced consumer experience in every single way, and you know how Amazon still holds the top position in smart speakers in 2018 in sales, and you know how it's being introduced in hospitals and with third-party in home appliances. They're even going to be embedded in cars. And when I asked my students if any of them used them, few did in Lebanon, and I said, how would you use them? And one of my students said, you know, Alexa, wake me up. So I thought that would be a good usage. So Alexa, it's amusing, would keep going on until they woke up. So that's a good usage there. Floor is yours.
Maybe I can do a mirroring.
We need to duplicate the space. Duplicate displays. No, panel is on. I think I need to connect it and work on it from the screen.
Duplicated.
It is, okay, now it is. Okay, now I see. All right, perfect, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We had so many exciting talks so far. I hope you guys will enjoy this talk as well. So I'm going to talk about virtual assistants, and especially voice-based virtual assistants. More and more people are using voice-based assistants such as Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant. And the reason for this is that they provide a very natural way of communication for us humans. So when a person talks with Alexa, we want to understand their needs. So they either want to perform a task, call someone, set an alarm, play music, get a recipe, or they're interested in knowing, getting some piece of information. But we don't want this to just be any experience for them. We want this to be as natural as possible, and we want this to be a very satisfying experience for the user. To ground things, let's go over an example. So here, a user is talking with MovieBot, which is an Alexa skill developed by my team. The user is asking MovieBot for a movie recommendation. Alexa first asks the user about their needs, in this case about the genre. The user responds adventure, and then Alexa makes a recommendation. The user can then ask any follow-up questions. Who directed it? Is it any good? Who's in it? Etc. And then they can either accept the recommendation or ask for another recommendation or ask for any other questions about movies, directors, and actors.
So here are the 5 components that enable this experience. These are more or less the same for any speech-based assistant. So the first case, like when a user talks with Alexa, Alexa first translates the audio signal into words, essentially replicating our sense of hearing. And this is done by a module called Automatic Speech Recognition, or ASR. Then the words, the text, goes through a natural language understanding component, which essentially tries to drive meaning from what was heard. Then we have Dialogue Manager, which says, okay, I understand what you said to me. How should I respond to you? And this really depends on, okay, what have you talked about so far in the conversation? What do I know about you? Maybe I want to adjust what I say depending on who I'm talking to. And then, so I decide, okay, what sort of thing am I going to say back to you? And then we have the application layer, which is essentially your memory or like your knowledge of the world. Says, okay, I know you asked for the director of a movie. I know that what I'm going to respond to is a person's name. So how do I know who directed this movie? I maybe talk to a database or a knowledge base to extract the information, and then I compose the text response. The text response then goes to text-to-speech, or TTS, and an audio signal is talked back to the user. So over the last years, we've come a long way, especially in terms of implementing our sense of hearing and our sense of understanding. But there's still a large gap in modeling our dialogue managers, or essentially how do we decide what to respond to the user. And one thing to note here is that all of this usually happens in noisy environments, so what the user says is not necessarily what Alexa hears or understands. And this is like the same for humans, right? We might not hear what the other person said, but we have a lot of over time, like we've developed a lot of different strategies to recover from that noise. Like I ask you to repeat, or maybe I restate what I think you said. And that way I can make sure that we're both grounded in the same understanding. So the main problem that is right now, the gap, is that today's dialogues are written manually. What does this mean? So this means that after, we have developers who say, okay, if I've extracted this sort of meaning from what the user said, how should I respond to it? Should I, make an API call? Should I ask another question? What is the best answer to give to the user for that particular question? But this makes the dialogue design very time-consuming, it's very error-prone, and it's also very limited in the sense that it's hard to develop multi-turn experiences for users. And another limitation is that these systems are non-adaptive, so they don't learn as they have more interactions with users. So our goal here in the dialogue research team is to see what parts of this dialogue management development can we automate. And we want this to essentially replicate how humans learn over time about how to respond to users. Humans use their context in order to understand or come up with the best way to answer a user. Humans also use their history of that they share with you in order to respond to you. Another thing is that we usually look for visual cues to see if you understand what I'm saying or not, or should I change what I'm saying, and how can we replicate that? How can we enable our assistants to have the same ability? So going back to the same diagram, essentially we want our dialogue manager to be a learning agent. We want it to be able to get smarter as it has more interactions with users, as it gets feedback from users, and then perhaps even have personalized dialogue managers for the user. So in the remainder of this talk, I will first talk about one way of formulating this problem, and then I will apply that formulation to recovering from errors as an example. Okay, so we can look at a dialogue as a series of interactions, right? So the user says something, Alexa hears what the user says according to a policy that it has, which is that set of rules that I mentioned, a mapping between what the user said and what the answer should be. It decides on the best action to take. And then once it replies to the user, it observes what the user says next. And then it also observes, maybe gets a feedback from what the user said. If the user is happy, it knows that it did the right thing. But if the user is shouting at it, it knows that, okay, maybe something went wrong. How should it recover from that? So essentially, we can formulate the problem as a Markov decision process, which is composed of 5 components. So we have the state, action, transition probability, reward function, and the discount factor. Let's quickly go over some of these, each one of these components. So first, we have the state, which is the sufficient statistics for the past. What have I heard so far? What do I think you said? What do I know about you? And essentially, all of this is the statistics that I have gathered so far in the conversation. The second one is the action space A, which says, okay, now that I know what I heard, I know what I heard, I know what you meant, I have some information from you, how should I respond to you? And essentially it says, okay, what are the different possible things that I can say to you? For the case of movies, for example, I can make a movie recommendation, or I can ask you to repeat yourself. I can ask some questions for you about, what is your favorite actor, what is the genre that you like, and then, so all of that composes my action space. Then we have the transition probability P, which says if I'm in state S, if I know what you said so far, if I take action A, I decide how to respond to you. What is the probability distribution over the next state S prime? So where am I essentially possibly going to end up in? And this depends on what I heard, what I think you said, and also depends on the user. And because we don't know what the user is going to say, this is not known in our situation. Then we have the reward function R, which says, okay, I thought you said something, I responded to you in a way, and then I ended up hearing what you said back to me. Okay, how good is all of this for me? And this can be evaluated either manually or automatically. Ideally, we want to calculate this automatically, and this depends on different things. Did I give you the answer that you were looking for? Am I getting a positive, so we can do sentiment analysis to see, am I getting a positive response from you? Or are you angry at me? We can look at voice cues. Are you happy? Are you angry at what I said? And finally, we have the discount factor gamma, which says, how much do I prefer getting a reward now versus getting it in the future? Okay, so now that we have this formulation, the problem that we want to solve is that by observing a sequence of state, action, and reward, okay, how can I find the optimal policy? So again, the mapping between states and actions, that set of rules that I mentioned earlier, such that if from any state I take an action according to that policy, on expectation, I'm going to maximize the sum of my discounted reward. So I'm going to take the optimal action at any state that I'm in. Okay, so having formulated the problem this way, let's see an example of how this applies to recovering from errors. And the reason that we want to do this is, like I said, conversations happen in environments. There might be multiple people talking. There might be background noise. You might be listening to music while talking to your assistant or to other people. And we want to see how we can actually adapt the strategies that humans have in recovering from understanding errors, and then apply it to machines. So for example, this is another example with MovieBot. So the user asks for the director of Cargo. Alexa responds, it was directed by Ben Affleck. The user then says, when did it come out? And then Alexa says, Argo came out in 2012. This is a very frustrating experience for the user, because not that at this point, they realize that Alexa heard them incorrectly, but they have to also disregard everything that they've heard so far in the conversation. They don't know if they should trust what Alexa said to them or not. Compare this to an experience where after the user asks for the director of Cargo, Alexa says, okay, I think I heard Argo, but I'm not sure. Let me confirm with the user. And then the user corrects Alexa, and then Alexa gives the correct response. So this is a much more satisfying experience for the user. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to learn essentially strategies to recover from understanding errors in conversation. But before we do that, we have to solve a problem. And that problem is that we need a good policy to appeal to users to collect data, but we also need data to train a good policy. This is like a chicken and egg problem, and it's very expensive. Every time we come up with a new policy, go and test it on actual users, because then we might lose their trust, right? We don't want to just try any policy with actual users. And the way that we overcome this is we build user simulators, and we learn a good enough policy with the user simulator. And then once we're satisfied with the quality of the policy that we learned, then we deploy it in production. We get actual users to work with it. And then, again, like through that feedback loop, improve the policy over time. So here are 4 components of an example user simulator. First, we generate what the users essentially what the user wants using recurrent neural networks. Then we have the utterance generator, where it says, okay, I know that the user has this thing in their mind that they want. How am I going to, what is the surface form for that? What is the actual sentence that the user is going to say? Then we convert that sentence into audio, and then we add noise to it, simulating different types of noise, different types of environments. And then the noisy audio goes to Alexa. Alexa returns the response, and then in the next turn of the dialogue, the user simulator takes what Alexa said, takes the conversational history that it has so far, and then generates the next turn of the dialogue. So, but it's very important for our user simulators to actually simulate real users, right? We don't want to just like learn any policy and then go and deploy it and see that no, like in production, it actually is not very good at all. So what we did here was we did a user study where we showed 78 participants dialogues that were generated by the user or dialogues that were generated by this user simulator. And we see that overall this was a very difficult problem. 67% of our participants thought a user simulated dialogue was generated by an actual human. And when we looked at the reason that they thought that user-simulated dialogue was actual human, the first row here pretty much sums it up. So on one hand, humans attribute expression of emotions to real humans. If you show them a very bad dialogue, but there's like 2 angry turns there, they say this has to be a human. A user simulator doesn't have emotions. On the other hand, people attribute simple or formal dialogues to simulators, but because in reality, a lot of people are still not used to talking with these virtual assistants, they do use formal or simple language. So again, that was another thing that really confused our people. So now that we have a good enough user simulator, let's talk a little bit about the dialogue policy. So here we're applying the formulation that I talked about to learning clarification policies. So in a very hypothetical scenario, our state is going to be what I heard, what I think the user said, right? What the meaning of what the user said. Maybe I have some sort of confidence over like, okay, how confident am I that the user said this, that the user wants this? And also, what are the previous things what are the previous steps that I have taken in this dialogue? Our actions here are very simple. There are 5 actions. So execute is I'm going to respond to the user by maybe talking to a backend database. Confirm confirms our understanding with the user. Repeat asks the user to repeat. And repeat intent and repeat slot show partial understanding of what the user said. So I heard Tom Hanks, but I don't know what type of information you want about Tom Hanks. Or I know that you want the plot of a movie, but I didn't hear correctly what movie you were talking about. So the next thing that we need to specify is our reward function. As I mentioned, ideally we want our reward function to be automatic. This is just like a simple rule-based, heuristic-based reward function, but in reality, we actually want to build models to estimate the user satisfaction, to say, okay, how satisfied do I think you are so far in the conversation? And then according to that, I adjust my strategy of how I respond to you. So we tried different RL algorithms. Here there are the 3 of them. So in the plot here, on the y-axis, we have the return, which is the accumulative reward over the entire interaction. And on the x-axis, we have the learning step. The only thing that you probably want to take away from this diagram is that all the 3 algorithms, they converge to a stable policy very quickly. But this is not enough. We also wanted to compare these RL policies with other simpler policies, like a rule-based policy. The first rule-based policy that we tried was always execute. So here we wanted to understand how important is actually clarification in our dialogues. The second one is that we just learned different thresholds. So it's like a bucketing algorithm based on how confident am I in what you said, I decide what action to take. And then the third approach was supervised learning. So we train different types of classifiers here. Again, our input is the state. Our output is one of the 5 actions that I mentioned. And then, so we compared these different algorithms in different noisy environments. So here again, on the y-axis, we have the return. On the x-axis, we have the signal-to-noise ratio, which says if I move, like here, if I move from left to right, the amount of noise decreases, right? So at SNR value of 10, I don't have that much noise. This is close to a clean audio, whereas at SNR value of 2.5, it's a very noisy environment. So overall, we see that all the algorithms perform better, improve. They give us more return as the amount of noise decreases, which is natural. Like there's less noise, so you have to recover. There's like less chances that you need to actually recover from errors. So shades of red here are the rule-based policies, and by comparing the 2 rule-based policies, we see the importance of having a clarification policy. So it's not sufficient. People are not, like one strategy that we can take is like, I respond to you, if it's incorrect, you're gonna ask me again for a question, right? But we see here that that strategy is not very helpful. And then overall, we see that across different noise levels, the RL algorithms outperform both rule-based and supervised approaches. And then when we look at 2 other metrics, here we have the success rate, and then we have the number of turns to execute. So here it says, how many clarification questions do I have to ask you in order to give you the correct response? And we see that the RL approaches, they strike a better balance. So they don't want to you don't want to confirm after every sentence that the user says, right? But you don't want to not confirm at all either. And here we see that the rule-based and the RL approaches, they get the similar success rate, but the RL approaches give you this by asking 35% fewer questions. So in summary, I talked about data-driven dialogue management and one way that we can formulate this problem. And I talked about one way, again, of simulating the users before actually deploying dialogue managers into production. And here are the people who contributed to this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. That was really amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, simplifying for us. So will it understand yalla? Yes? In Arabic? Okay, so our third speaking this morning, our third speaker is put my glasses, can't see anything, is Laura Shaibi. So Laura has 20 years of digital media experience across marketing research, audience development, media measurement, and advertising effectiveness with domain expertise in media delivered digitally. She has had numerous companies build up their digital transformation and capabilities through commercial consumer data and market insights. Her passion has always been in understanding audiences, helping brands, and evaluating communication and content effectiveness. She has been judging media, research, and data creativity for over 10 years, having won over a dozen Media Insights Awards across her career, including Women of Tomorrow as one to watch in the media industry. So today, Laura is going to talk about finding human behavior working in digital. And with NBC, you know, when I was talking to her earlier, and we discussed how NBC is really part of all our history and our childhoods, also her sons. And when I asked her, you know, why did you choose to come to the Middle East? She was in the UK. She said, because I couldn't get the job done in the UK away. I had to be here to do the job that I'm doing. So we're looking forward. I did get a glimpse of your talk when I attended yesterday, but it was very interesting. We're looking forward to today's. Thank you.
Good morning. Whoa, I don't need that. Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here in this track for women in data science. It was great to hear Cassie's speech. I'm definitely of the prospector and inspiration line of the business, and I've been looking at digital data for 20 years. In fact, the first time a machine took my job was in 1999. I was very heavily pregnant, and it was an extremely frightening place to be in. And I was providing information services by telephone, and interactive voice recognition services overtook my job, and I couldn't believe that a computer could be better at doing my job. And I've been outrunning machines ever since. When it comes to the world of data and digital, people always ask me, well, what's the difference, Laura? This person's in data and you're in digital. What makes you different? And I said, really, the difference is my data is extremely dirty. It's live. It's like you're surfing on a wave, and that wave can suck you up, it can move, there's a rip curl. You don't have control over the environment of the data that's being produced. And I say, data is kind of like skiing, and all the data is the snow on the mountain. And you can ski, and you can navigate it. Sometimes you get swallowed up by an avalanche, but it's a little bit more structured and formed. And I often say, you know, a surfer can learn to ski, but a skier cannot always learn to surf. So what I'm going to take you through today is not so much models where, you know, this is what you're learning in your classroom. This is the business track. I'm going to literally take you through some of my 20 years of domain expertise working with digital data to help you frame some skills for life should you be someone who goes into the field of working with digital kinds of data sets. But before I do that, this is a business track, and I'm going to tell you the number one most successful thing you can do as a woman in data right now is build your network. Because you are going to be challenged every single step of the way for what you do. You will make decisions where people are going to lose their jobs. 1/3 of all jobs that exist today, according to a study that was done in the UK, will not exist in 20 years. And when you go into the workforce, you will be probably people who are influencing the people who will not have jobs anymore. So please, can you turn to the people sitting beside you? If you don't know them, can you please shake hands right now and introduce yourselves? This is really, really important. Because you're going to come up against someone and they're going to tell you you're wrong. And when you get so intimate with your data sets, you will literally feel that data run through your blood like a pulse. And when someone tells you with your data set that you're wrong, you're going to feel your pulse rise. And you're going to have to call someone who knows the kind of data that you know, and you're going to have to ask them, am I losing my mind? Because everything, like what Becky said in My Instinct, is telling me that I know I'm right, I simply can't prove it yet. So we're going to talk about digital media reality, digital media analytics, and by the way, take their name, take their number, connect on LinkedIn, join societies, join associations, join groups. This is your future success sitting right in this room beside you, okay? We're going to talk about the future of digital and some scary things that I see going on. I've been looking at fraud in the digital world for over 10 years, and I'll tell you a few examples of what fraud looks like. And then also a little bit of talking about what is tomorrow's digital world and what is what we call real. And when I say real, what is really human? Okay, so this is an example. I measure quite a few things for NBC. There's about 50 different digital apps, experiences. Shahid, for example, is available across 10 different like core screens, whether it's smart TV, app, website. Sometimes I get asked to measure JSON feeds on airplane screens, smartwatches, augmented reality. I'm measuring all of these different kinds of things. So if you think back to Cassie's world, I'm the person who's trying to make sure that your ingredients are really good and fresh tomatoes and that they're not rotten tomatoes that you're making the pizza for. Got your back. So, probably the most difficult environment for digital data is the mobile phone. And the reason is because these devices have a prioritization framework that you're trying to do your job around. So let's say, for example, you missed a show on NBC and you type into a browser and you want to catch up, you type in the show name, and then you start watching the show. You get about 10 seconds in, and then your mom calls. So the system of the phone has override capabilities, and there are certain functions that always have master priority. Things like your phone ringing, and also your alarm clock. It would be very bad if it didn't work. So then you start speaking to your mom for 11 minutes, and then you're faffing around, and then when you hang up the call, you got push notifications, so then you start messaging, and then when you're finished messaging, you go off and you start using another app because you get distracted. I'm still trying to measure your show, by the way. And then you're walking down the road, oh my God, you see something amazing, and you start taking photos of it, and then you start editing the photo, and then you start uploading the photo, and then when you've uploaded the photo, you end up in probably like a Snap or an Instagram, and then you see something, oh my God, that's amazing, and then you go in and you start shopping, and I'm still trying to measure you watching your program on the phone. I will tell you, in the digital world, life gets in the way of your perfectly measured data set that you're trying to achieve your job in. The first 10 years of my career, I learned all of the disasters of what I thought was good information. Like, for example, my first rookie year at the BBC, I was measuring all the live streaming radio, and one particular month, it was like the performance went up 5-fold. And I was like, oh my God, what an amazing month that we had. Was there some like gig going on, and everybody was tuning in? And the guy in radio freaked out. He's the domain expert at this point, and he goes, oh my God, our server is broken. So people were hitting play, 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 play. My one advice to you in the digital world, never take a metric on its own, ever. At the very least, try and triangulate 3 metrics together. And when I went back and I looked at the request to play data, and I looked at the average time spent per usage session, it had halved. It had gone from over 40 minutes to under 20 minutes. And I learned very quickly, time is one of the most important metrics that will help you understand if the digital data is lying to you or not. So whether it's screen switching, system interruptions, timeout idling, lock screen, push notifications, session intervals. Oh, and by the way, the person went back to watch the show, but they started watching it after midnight. So now you are a new person on a new day because you're anonymous, and I have to stitch you together. Digital data is a fallacy when it comes to measuring 2 important things: time and people. In most digital environments, the data sets that you will get to be able to do your job have 24-hour cycles. So every single day, the amount of users or people, depending on if it's anonymous data, I work mostly with anonymous data, so I have to try and stitch you together over a course of a time period. And as midnight is normally the cutoff for resetting data every single night, and most people watch programming between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., you're half of a person over the course of those 2 days. So when you work with digital data, you have to understand who was the master architect of the data set and what was the logic that they applied to it for you to even be able to understand what is the quality of the information that you're getting. Now, these are signal data proxies. And in the world of digital, increasingly now, there are more signal data proxies than there are the quality of the human data. So when I started out, it was probably about 5% was what I would call inflated data, where it wasn't necessarily humans who were initiating the actions. I would say now, maybe within the next 5 to 10 years, what will happen is we've been in the digital world trying to weed out everything that is not human, whether it's bots, it's simulators. It will get to the point where we're going to have an inversion because it'll be too expensive to weed out the noise, and it'll become cheaper to just find the real people doing real actions. And so I specialize in what I call user-initiated behavior, and I'll come on to talk about the different kinds of data noise in digital data. So, for most of you who work in the data world, you will probably get what I call count metrics. Count metrics are very simple signal pieces of data that are like whether it's a money spent. Count metrics can be added up together, and you can slice it and dice it in many, many ways. Whereas calculated metrics in the digital world, they are derived metrics that require some level of heavy processing before you can actually start to work with the data. So for example, as I said, in digital data, usually every single day, someone is reset at midnight. And so if someone came 14 times over the course of a month to your digital environment, and you want to look at 2 months or 90 days worth of data, you have to deduplicate them to get to the consumer, and then you can map out who and what they're doing. But oftentimes, these data, because people are using multiple platforms, they will have holes in them. So like a prime example I give to people who are new to digital data, I'm in the television world. And let's say, for example, you know, the performance, it's peaking the first 1 week, 2 weeks, and then the graph starts to go down in the digital data. You know, someone who's not used to reading this data will go, oh my God, the show's terrible. We need to take it off air. If you don't know how to read the data, what may actually be happening is the show is so amazing, people are going back to live television to make sure that they're watching it live, and that's not recorded digitally. So you have to realize the ecosystem that your data lives in is not a vacuum. And you have to be extremely careful not to make the kinds of assumptions that can harm your business when actually the success is thriving outside of what you can measure. So also, there's some things when it comes to digital data. You will find certain practitioners who are actually all about minimizing the error in the data, where there will be those that want to extract the maximum amount of value out of it. I've been trained in the discipline to go, can I trust this information before I hand it over and partner with data science communities? Now, there are 3, in my world, types of data sets that I continually have to zigzag across in order to build and construct a digital story within a human reality. The first set is what I call people or customer-centric data. This may be your customer database, it may be in the digital world, the cookie count, or the logged-in users or registered users, depending on the data set. But because you only have your perspective of what's going on, you often have to buy in data. And these would be from very big research companies that are running consumer-centric panels to get a very holistic view of what's going on in the market. The second data set is what I call asset-centric data. So for example, these are all your own products and services that your business will own that really typically you only have the master data set about what's going on. Now, these, in the digital world, they can be measured by other companies, but what those other companies will not have is all of the lines of business intelligence that are sitting behind the front end of what consumers are using to make business sense of what's going on within that experience and make business decisions. The last layer is what I call network-centric data. And this is, in the digital world, the fat pipes of things being aggregated together. So like, for example, like whether you have technologies already on your phone that's taking all data of everything you're doing on your phone, or maybe there's a piece of code in your router, in your broadband connection in your household, and it's sending back every single thing that is going through that device. Or, for example, I work with a lot of market intelligence partners, and I'm localizing them into the Middle East to get a line of sight about how my business is doing. And right now, one, for example, Tubular Labs, they are aggregating all videos that are being uploaded worldwide on every single major platform, like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, AOL, Dailymotion, everything but Snap. And right now, there are 18 years of content being uploaded every single day. What I'm helping my business do is understand where is the addressable Arabic opportunity. And so working with this vendor, they have data science, I have domain expertise. I worked with this vendor to say, you must be able to catalog these assets by language in order for us to find the addressable Arabic opportunity, particularly living in the UAE, where only 1 in 10 people are actually nationals and locals of that country. These 3 pieces of data will help you tell your digital story. Who, what, and in what context are things happening? Broken digital data. This little slide is a bit of a loaded slide. It's 20 years worth of failures on my side I want to impart on you, so your 20 years, you do not have to stumble the way I did. In your career, the first thing you will do is you will probably be able to sniff out broken data. That doesn't look right. I don't trust that number. Something's wrong. And over time, my advice to you is you will know that you will start to craft your mastery of your data sets to do your job when you can also sniff out frauds. And in the early days, fraud would be things like what I call page inflators or auto-inflators. So a website page would auto-refresh every 2 minutes, and it would create another page impression. And so if the team was gold on, you have to get 10 million pages viewed this month, it's very easy. They just auto-refresh the page. Now, when data goes wrong, this is systematically how I look to go, where is the problem? The first one is it technical? And it is completely outside of your control. So you've got to realize, for example, let's say we have the Shahid player and it's embedded in Facebook. So we own the player. We do not own the browser environment that it's living in. We do not own the platform that it is being hosted on. We do not own the technology or the operating system that also has master controls and can even stop our experience from doing what we want it to do in our business logic. And equally, on top of that, you will then have layers of business logic, industry logic, and regulatory logic on what will influence the quality of your data. So, an example for technical issues and outside of our control. Literally, in a week, data can fall off a cliff, and we can have 30% of our performance wiped out. When we go and look, the first thing I look is, I try and look at the ISP and data, internet service providers, and go, what's going on? Or I look at countries, and I realize, Iraq, what happened? And someone has to come back and tell me, Laura, the government of Iraq shut down the internet for 4 days. That's why your data is gone. It's outside of my control. Okay, so our performance is healthy. That's outside of our control. Another technical outside of your control. When it's Ramadan, we literally smash the internet. And internet service providers think that we're having what's called a DNS attack, which means like we're being hacked, and we get shut down. So apologies if the service doesn't work. There's a lot of things outside of our control, and an ISP will blacklist us. So then someone has to make a call to the internet service provider and say, hey, we're a good guy. Can you please turn our service back on? Huge chunks of missing data. And I'm sure anyone who is not living in Lebanon doesn't know that your power switches off several times a day. So you're going to have holes in the data. This is your domain expertise. Now, what's technical and within your control? Servers breaking. Security layers in the internet. So there are different levels of encryption, and when you try and embed one service into another service, if these have discrepancies, the product won't work. So during Ramadan, for example, our security level of our player that was embedded into Facebook actually changed the experience and upped the security levels, and over 1.1 million people were blocked out of being able to play content because our security level was incompatible. There's going to be many, many layers of noise that you, in your own domain expertise, will need to come to learn. These are universal truths of where to look. Another example is and trust your instinct. Don't back down. You may not find the answer. I'll tell you, my first year coming for Ramadan, iOS platforms, literally overnight, we lost 27% of our audience. And in my heart of hearts, the data, the way I read it, I said something technical has happened. It is nobody's fault. Something technical has happened on why you cannot play. And it was only 11 months later, when I looked at the crash reports in the Apple iTunes store, that I realized during Ramadan, iOS platforms did a global upgrade to the Apple architecture, and what happened is it rendered our player incompatible with the new upgraded operating system of Apple. This is digital data. It is extremely noisy, and it only takes working with I'm a seasoned domain expert, to look at the data and say, I know you think that it's human and that people have disappeared, but I would tell you 99% of the time it is technical before you even get a chance to understand what's going on the human level. Methodological, your engineer and product guy decides to rebuild the product in a different way. Methodological, so one time the word video in the URL was transposed and the O&E was spelt wrong. We lost 25% of our traffic overnight. Thank God we could refine it again to be able to know what was going on. Probably the most difficult is business logic. When I was at Yahoo, we had 33 different code bases of data architects because it had been sticky taped together over so many years. There was not one code base. And what had actually happened was, because it was so ancient, built in the 90s, the way the code base was built, it was architected on coupling country with language. And this coupling, and I will tell you in your own data sets, in your careers, when you're working with business people, do not let them couple things together that cannot be unbroken. Because once it's coupled, your data set, you will not know what is driving the data. And it took Yahoo 2.5 years to reconstruct and rip apart the code base of marrying language and country location. This was a business logic. And now if I ever see a company trying to pair certain things together, I tell them at a code base and a structured level for digital, you are going to lose 18 months in rebuild. And if you sit on this era of your build and your data now, and you sit on it for 2 years, you're going to lose 3.5 years of your opportunity to pick up and collect clean data. You're going to have to be resilient. You're going to have to build your network. And when your product guy turns his back on you and he ignores you, you are then going to have to get your industry to speak up and try and regulate and try and standardize and try and get normalized definitions so that we can all say that we're saying the same thing. And when I came, for example, to NBC, I had to say to them, this is the industry standard. Please believe me, you don't want to lose time. Non-human traffic. Sophisticated, invalid traffic is the noise in the digital data. And if you go to places like China, about 5% of what's actually going on is user behavior, and 95% might be bots or like non-human traffic. And you, in your career, are going to get a lot of data, and you're going to think that it is human behavior, and it is all simulated. And at some point, you will have to find a way to understand what is user-initiated versus machine. And then, hopefully we get to human data, and I can partner with you, the data scientists, to be able to build great models. So what's going on in the future? Anything that has an IP connection is a medium of the future to me. So I'm prepared in my role to measure anything that you want to throw at me. If you want a wall, a mirror, countertops, portable screens, wearables, digitized retail spaces, surfaces, or even what I call movables, like cars. What is changing, though, in the digital world, and this will be really important for you because this is a very tight point of tension. So, data policies all over the world are completely different, and they're governed in different ways. You have China, where it's 100% login, and if you do not have a known customer ID, you pretty much can't function. Whether you're in the Tencent environment, Alibaba, people buy everything through WeChat. This is your banking framework. The ISPs also have banking licenses in China. This is the only way to function, so it's like 100% known audience, pretty much. In places like Europe, they're actually starting to go dark with GDPR GDPR. If you've not heard that word before, please look it up. It is your right to not be tracked in digital environments, which makes all of your jobs just that little bit harder because you will be dealing with incomplete data sets, particularly in the digital world. And then you take places like America, which had a completely open, liberal, free for all. And then I think you all know what is happening as a result of that. I think these environments need a lot more governance. So in the world of digital and offline, so now we're going to come back to talking about human behavior. There are two philosophies. So there's usability and design. And usability and design is all about, in the digital world, being able to design the experience down to the individual. So every single person in this room feels like they have an intimate, personal experience with whatever product and service they're using. This is the digital world's philosophy, build for one. The offline philosophy is called consumer or customer experience, and it is the polar opposite. It is being able to design an experience that has 100% accessibility. So one path that every single person can walk through. An example might be you go to the airport, as soon as you get out of the vehicle to go into the airport, every single one of you have to be able to achieve the objective to get on the plane. In China, because they have 100% logged in data, Jack Ma from Alibaba has coined a term, new retail. And what new retail is, it's really the crashing together of these two very disparate philosophies into one business model. So being able to have an offline experience as a human in an extremely personal way. And if you haven't seen, a lot of retail companies are suffering. They're in what I call the distribution model. And I think what will grow on top of this, and what you as individual practitioners will have the opportunity to do, is to reimagine the customer experience in the offline world infused with data and in using what I would say is probably digital data. The difference, customer experience, is really, it's about the relationship-centric data that you will have. And then in the digital world, infused with all of the metadata that will help you understand who that person is and what their preferences are, and able to deliver a personalized experience. So what I've seen in my 20-year career is that digital actually drives a very, very big wedge in what you would call the head and the tail model. So in most lines of business, like, okay, I was giving the example yesterday to the class, and I said, you know how the power goes out several times a day in Lebanon? Well, that model is a distributed model, which means that the government has its electrics facility. It takes power from other locations, maybe it's hydro, maybe it's solar. It brings it into a centralized location, and then it has to decentralize it back into your households and your businesses. Well, the models of tomorrow will probably be more blockchain related. So maybe you have solar panels on the top of your roof, and that solar panel feeds your building, and if you have excess, you can then pass on the electricity into your community. Now, there are two models that digital creates in the world, and in order to deliver this, the first thing is things need to become digitized, so anything that was paper or in these, like what I call these hub and spoke models, become digitized, and then digitalization transforms businesses. The two models are what I call automated and something as a service. So the example I often give is in the entertainment world. Let's take, for example, going to the cinema. Right now, the cinema's quite far away. Maybe you go and you watch your movie, and then it may be in the future that you've got your phone, you walk in, you don't have to speak to anyone, you buy your own popcorn, you get your own drink, you sit down, the cinema's open 24 hours a day, and then you can leave. Or the more bespoke service, data-infused experience might be entertainment as a service, where you have 5-star seating, and you have a 3-course meal, and you have a heated seat, and you have a purple velvet blanket. Automated tries to rip out human interaction as much as possible, mitigate all costs, make a 24-hour service, and automated to drive down the cost of entry. The something as a service model is a value-added service and tries to increase the basket of goods per person. Most likely, you're going to have to decide which business model you want to be able to thrive in. Here's an example. How are we doing for time? I need like 2 minutes? Okay. This is the automated example from China.
发现陌生人进入。In your data world, if you're working with digital data, that was an example where it was completely automated, pretty much. The digital data has a lot of frauds in it. Whether it is domain spoofing, whether it is simulating actions that look like it is human, but it's not,